Hello everybody. This is your good friend Shitty Webcam Matt, and today we are going to take a look at the new player in the ring. He's got brass knuckles, he's got whatever stuff your boxers use, like boxing gloves, and he's in the ring against ACSS, and his name is ATF. Stands for, I think, Advanced Themer Framework. I couldn't think of something better right now. For this new feature in Advanced Themer, Maxime, who is the creator of Advanced Themer, teamed up with Ellen Blair, whose mom is so fat that she can wear the equator as a belt. So when it came out the other day, I figured this is probably a good candidate for a simple site rebuild that I'm about to do. And I thought, hey, what if this can fix some of the speed issues I've been having with the builder over the past 10 to 12 builds that I've done over the, I would say, last 12 to 14 months with ACSS and AT together. It's just that slightly laggy, jumpy, stuttery feel that you get when you work with ACSS and AT enabled at the same time. You always feel like the UI is sort of playing catch up a little bit with what you're doing. You can see here the lag when I'm trying to type, and this is on Firefox on Linux, so obviously your mileage may vary. It could be different on Brave and different operating system, but it's there and it's palpable, and things just feel snappier and more responsive and more immediate when you have just AT installed, or for that matter probably just ACSS installed. It's not the fault of any of these two tools. I just think that if you have both of them on your build, and perhaps BricsForge on top of that as well, like at some point you just weigh the builder down, and that's just what happens. So, so the question becomes, how do these two compare with each other? There's some drawbacks, there's some advantages of one over the other, and we're here today to discover them all. Well, some of them. Well, the ones I discovered. What we're going to do today is look at a website, vividyoga.de. This is the before. This is what the website looks at the time of recording, and this is what we are about to build. So let's jump right in. So before we even start building this, we're going to compare my blueprint that I've been using for about a year, which has ACSS, with the base setup for this new rebuild of the Vivid Yoga website, which has everything sans ACSS. So you can see here we have 11 plugins installed, and here we only have 10 because ACSS is not there. And luckily, I think that's a really great thing that ACSS offers. If you go to ACSS options in the plugin settings, you can set here delete on deactivation. So I was able to just make a copy of my blueprint and then use that delete on deactivation feature to remove ACSS from this blueprint, and it's really gone as if it had never been there. There's nothing left in the database that pertains to ACSS. So kudos to the ACSS team for making it that simple. I can reuse everything else on my blueprint, all the pre-installed plugins here. Gonna take a quick stroll over those so you can see what I have on my blueprint by default. Next, I'm going to show you the different settings in AT for the blueprint, which has ACSS still on it, and now here the rebuild for the Vivid Yoga website. On the general page, global settings, we have the global colors and the CSS classes deactivated for the ACSS blueprint, because those are features that partly or completely overlap with what ACSS can do. So I'm not using them when I have ACSS installed. But here I have global colors and CSS classes enabled. Gives us a few more tabs here, but the only really other interesting things is on the builder tweaks. Let's see here. On classes and styles, I want to have the color variables picker that AT has here with ACSS. I don't want that because ACSS has its own color variable. You know what I mean. And the variable picker event should be, in this case, both right click and a V icon. In this case, obviously it shouldn't, because ACSS has a right click functionality that would then clash with AT's. Apart from that, everything's really the same. So I'm gonna quickly show you what settings I have in AT so you can see what we're gonna work with today. Just gonna scroll over them here so you can pause the video at any point if you wanna see what I have enabled and disabled. And if you have any questions about any of these, you can just leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will probably, possibly, perhaps answer. Let's see. In the keyboard shortcuts, actually, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm not really using because, well, quite honestly, I haven't yet looked into it. I mean, AT is just abundant. So some of the things that I'm not using, I'm just putting them on the pound key, so they're not, I don't accidentally hit them. The new feature here, or the new keyboard shortcut here, is Control-Shift-U, which we're going to be using to open the AT framework. Click here, Control-Shift-U, and here's the AT framework, and we want to enable all of this stuff, right? So for the introduction to the Advanced Themer framework, how it works and how to set it up, I'm going to refer you to two videos that were made by Alan Blair, who's actually the gentleman that worked on this framework together with Maxime. And he has a video here, the intro video, and he has the setup video. Wait, where is it? So there's a setup video as well, and then there's also a really nice video by Paul W.P. Tutz, who gives a quick overview. And I'm going to link to all three of these for you. These are the ones that I recommend watching at the time of recording, at least, which is April 19th, 2025. Alan is going to release a couple more videos, but yeah, he's not there yet. So I would say definitely, if you want to get into this framework, watch Paul's video first, which is here, and then watch the intro and setup. Again, the links are going to be in the description. So the first thing that I'm doing, or that I already did actually, to prepare for this build is to go into the color manager and set up the primary, secondary, base, and my black and white. So for black, I'm actually using not exactly completely black. I'm just using this 15-15-15, very dark gray, because it's not good practice to use black in web design. I know in ACSS you do have black and white, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But for this build, since we're not going to have a neutral dark color, I just want to have something that just stands in as black. We're not going to use a real black in this build, so I'm just co-opting this black that Maxime prepared in the framework for us, and I'm just making it a little bit brighter. Then we have the primary, secondary, and base colors, which are from the original website. This orange tone as the primary, the secondary is this green, and then the base is this dark desaturated blue tone. And those are the colors that we're going to be using for our rebuild. The other thing I want to use is a really nice font. The original was built with Open Sans. There's nothing wrong with Open Sans, but it's also not, it's a good trusty workhorse, but I think you can do something a little bit more original with the rebuild. So I picked this color, which has the great name Apricot Flux. And you can see it's a variable font, so it goes all the way from very thin to very, very bold. And we can go to Matthias Altmann's web font loader, download it, unzip it here, then just upload that whole folder to WP Content Fonts on the server space. Now let's go to the WordPress backend, go to Appearance, MA Custom Fonts, and you'll see that Apricot Flux is installed and ready to use in bricks. So do we start building or do we start building? I think we start building. First of all, we're going to use Firefox to go to vivid yoga.de. Come on. Why are we using Firefox? Because there's a really nice feature. Press Control I and then we go to media, and then we can get some of the pictures. We don't want to have all of them right now, but we want to start with something. It's okay. Save as. Yeah, there it is. So that's the first one. 4,000 pixels. That's a big. Open that with GIMP. Alt-IS. We want to go to 2,000. That's more than enough. And we're going to call this Yoga Pose Isabel Hodson 01. Yeah, 70 is enough. If we press Control I again here, we're going to get some more poses. All right, so we have two pictures. Also, don't judge me. Yes, I have a Peppa Pig habit. So let's throw a bunch of shit in here just to have something to start with. We're going to put a section, and then we're going to put a heading and basic text. Now, the first thing we want to do is improve on this site hero, because it says nothing, right? Like there's no H1, there's no intro text, there's no call to action, no nothing. So we want to have that, and then, you know, because it just ends with a footer, we want to have a few more sections teasing the other contents of the website, and then a CTA, and then we can have this footer. And of course we can make this footer a little bit nicer as well, but you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can still use the basic structure of the front page and the website, but obviously we just need to extend this front page a little. I mean, it's a matter of pride for us as web designers, right? So we have a heading. The heading in this case needs to be on H1. Delete this. I can come up with some better content later. Now, background image for the hero section. Upload something into photos. We'll start with this one. Full size. Center. This is our hero. That's what we're going to call it. Opener. Let's do some more thinking here. I want to make the hero, I want to give the hero a higher height. Min block size 80 VH. I'm going to center align this stuff. Let's set the fonts. Go to typography. So there's no ACSS dashboard here or anything like that. And then if we go look at the variables, obviously we're not going to set fonts and variables. And in the framework itself, there's also no such option, right? It's just stuff that we enable or disable. So to the best of my knowledge, or from what I expect here, the way to set the fonts will be to just use Brix's own settings for that, right? So we go to body, the body font, we want that to be our really nice font that we installed here. I think now the base text size needs to be a little bit bigger. Text S&M, no, let's see. I was just going to say, we can always revisit this later and see if really the fonts work all that well. On this project, I'm kind of winging it because, yeah, the original website already exists, and I'm kind of remixing it a little, but I'm not completely reinventing the whole thing. So I'm skipping the whole part where I do this in Figma first and then plan the whole design. I'm just going to do it in the builder and then come up with sensible BIM classes and all that stuff and still make it scalable and maintainable enough. I also know that this client isn't going to need a great deal of real work in the future. So this isn't the best way to do this kind of project, but it's gonna do quite well for just a simple rebuild for a website. That's just it is the only reason we're really rebuilding this is because the software that she's using to run the old website is just on PHP 5.4 and it's not compatible with later PHP versions, so it needs to be done. So we might as well. So this is really quick and dirty. Right, so now I wanted to look into the variables because I think it's the nature of this font. This text is kind of small now, right? So we're using the variable text S here. All right, so here's how you increase the font size for body text. It's pretty simple, really. All you need to do is not change the AT heading variable, but just change the AT text variable. So the min is, let's put that up to 18, and then we push this up to 20, and we just see what happens. Yes, something did happen. Okay, so not 18, let's make it 17. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to go to the hero and I want to experiment a little bit with gradient and overlay type of stuff. So we're going to do an overlay. Right click on color, transparency 1. And here we run into what you might call a limitation as compared to ACSS. I can pick the transparencies for the secondary color, but not for any of these shades, right? Obviously, now what I need to do is I just need to make them, but ACSS is a little bit more comfortable here because it just has them for you, right? All right, we're back. So as you can see, a bunch of time has passed. We're now over 1 hour into this build, 1 hour and 20 minutes almost, and I've spent quite a bunch of time on a few different subjects. One of them was figuring out what to do and what's not possible to do with the colors. And secondly, I have been working on button styling, and obviously, as you can see, there's overall styling that has happened here. So let's break this down step by step. So indeed, it turns out that it's not possible to make transparent shades of color shades. I asked about that on Facebook, and Maxime confirmed that. I came up with a workaround after trying a whole bunch of different things. So one of the things I tried was to make another scale. Like here, if you make a custom scale and then you just say, okay, I want to call it primary D5 T-dash, and you can just give it the hex code of a darker shade, add a target, second color, and just say, okay, I want this to be opacity 0.5, and this one, first one, opacity 0.9. I can generate a scale, where it goes, it just creates different shades of this darker, or different transparent versions of this darker shade. However, you can only do that once. So it's like a joker that you have. You can play it once. Now, if I want to generate more shades, it says there's already a custom scale. So that's limitation number 1. And then limitation number 2 is if I right click here, the shades that I just generated, they don't show up here. They don't show up in any of the views that you have in the AT provided color picker. So in order to get to them, you just use Brix's own color picker. There they are. So if you want to generate a custom scale, you can do that, but you can only do it once. So that's not really an option here, because if I want to get on par with ACSS, simple answer is I can't, because there's no way to make transparent shades for color shades. Obviously, you can go outside the framework, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, you're outside the framework. You're gonna have to do any changes in the future twice. So here's the solution that I found. I just put some opacity on the before, right? So you just go here, gradient, you put the color gradient that you want, and then you put some opacity on it, and then you get this wonderful result. Next up, what I did is I put a button here, and I said I want it to be styled secondary color, and I want to change the look of the button. Originally, it's just all rounded, slightly rounded corners, but I want them all to be corners, and then I want only this one to be rounded. And at first I went into settings, theme styles, into the button element, and I thought, hey, I can probably do this here. But a lot of these controls don't have any effect on the buttons. Instead, what you need to do is use the variables that Maxime provides for buttons. You have primary, secondary, light, and dark prepared variables, and then you have default button styles. And then you can scroll down here, go to AT button border radius, and you just put this in here, right? And radius variables are prepared for you. You can use those, and then, you know, all of this is pretty fun and dandy. But again, I mean, a lot of this framework is more rigid than ACSS, which just confirms the point that Kevin's been making, that there's nothing as flexible as ACSS on the market. At least according to my experiences so far, this seems to be true. But hey, I mean, if you don't need that kind of flexibility, if you're willing to work within the more rigid constraints of this framework, then this does a good job so far. I think you just need to know what you can do and what you can't do. So that's how I made the button. And then I went and created some bubbles. And for these, I used absolute values. The container here is flex, and it has the basic content gap as your column gap. Then these are 2 blocks. So they all aim to be 100% wide. So if you don't constrain this one, then they just become 50% of the container each. We have 2 bubbles in here. They're also just divs with a bunch of text in them. Text has the emphasis class on it. Actually, on my blueprint, I have a couple of classes that I prepared that are just there for me to pick up and use when I want them. So if I look at my typography here, there's shout out, tagline, as accent heading. So there's a couple of classes here that have no styles in them, but if I ever want to do anything special with text on the website, then I can pick some of these. I don't need to come up with them. And so I just put the emphasis class on it, and then later I can style it. So the bubble, what I did is I just created these 2 divs, and then I styled them on the ID level. And afterwards I just put the bubble class on them, and I clicked on the context menu and I said import ID styles to class, and bada bing, bada boom, here's your bubble class. Then I did 2 more modifier classes. So there's a bubble here that's white. The white bubble gets its own overlay gradient. And then an even nicer way to do this is to give the original bubble up here a bubble S class, and then just say I want this to be 7.0 rem. There we go. And then this gets a little smaller, this gets a little bigger, because the container of these 2 bubbles has a fixed width. Used flex bases 18 rem. And that's how we get this. And later we need to do some breakpoint gymnastics, and then we're good. Oh, and in case you were wondering about how I overlap the bubbles, I just went to the parent and I put some custom CSS in here. So the first bubble, nth child 1, I gave it a margin top of 4em and a margin right of -4em, and bada bing, bada boom, that's where it went. One other thing I did is make the whole content a little bit narrower. You go to the variable manager, site, and then in AT site box max width, You go 1080 pixels. It was 1300 at the beginning, and now it's 1080. Another thing that I noticed occurred when I looked at the footer, I was tinkering around with the colors, and at first I renamed neutral to base. And if you do that, you break some of the classes that this framework comes with. And you can see that the footer loses its colors. That's because here on this footer, I have AT color set and AT color set neutral. This is similar to the predefined colors that ACSS has for dark, light backgrounds. So the color set just allows you to set a bunch of different colors here that play together. So you, for instance, you have a darker background, and you can define that within this color set, you're going to have a lighter text color. So from what I can tell, if you really want to change the names of your colors, then you better start changing the names of these classes as well to match the colors. And then you need to go in here and really rewrite all the CSS, like AT base, and so on and so on. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just not going to mess with that. It's just, hang on, let's bring back the color manager, right? And you just rename this back to neutral, and then you're golden. That said, I'm really not sure where that leaves you if you want to have, for instance, a base color here as an additional color, or a tertiary color, or an accent color. If you want to add all this, I mean, I guess you can do that, but then it's not going to be compatible with the framework, or at least the framework's not going to have any provisions for that. So if you want to have a color set for instance, for that, as far as I can tell, you're going to have to do it yourself. So let's build some more, shall we? We have an About Me page, a page about yoga as what yoga is. Then we have classes, workshops, schedules. We have the pricing, and then we have a contact page. So we want to build a few more sections here to tease these different subjects. So we're going to have one that we call philosophy. We're going to have one section that we call services. Another one CTA, and that should be it. So in the philosophy section, we're going to talk about who is Isabel and what about yoga? What is that? So we're gonna go into both of these subjects, and we're gonna have links to both of these pages. Then in the services section, we're gonna cover the classes, the workshops, the schedules, and we're also gonna have a single link to the post. And then the contact stuff is gonna be the CTA, contact me now. As you can see, ATF does a lot of the spacing for you already because it's just set up that way in the theme styles. If we go to the section element, we can see that just the proper variables are here, the proper variables are there. There's a gutter variable. So this is not entirely dissimilar from what ACSS does for you. However, there's some stuff that you need to do yourself that Smart Spacing does for you in ACSS. So if I add 2 blocks here and I want to make this a flex, and let's go here. Can see that the row gap is already there, and I'm actually not sure why, but if I go here, then there's no column gap. So I go here and I need to bring up the AT content gap variable for this. And then here, I believe the AT content gap is not 16. It doesn't compute to 16 pixels by default. So if I put this in here, then this should get larger as well. Let's just find out here. We have a lot. I think it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. So yeah. I'm not quite sure why it's there for the row gaps, but not for the column gaps. So that's just one thing you need to do yourself. Another really nice thing that AT has that I think is there. It's there in a different way in ACSS. Is if we go to the class manager and we go here to grid utility classes, we can make. I already made 2. I made a grid 2 and a grid 3 class. Let's just delete the grid 2 class and add it again. So we're going to call this AT grid 2, and then the column gap for that class is already going to be content gap. Then I can say I want maximum number of columns to be 2, so I can decide this is going to be 2 columns, not more. And then I can say minimum column width in pixels. So there's also a feature in ACSS that allows you to set a min width, and then it's called auto grid. So it's not too dissimilar from auto grid. But then what happens is that I don't need to save anything here. I can just close and I can start using this class right away. So I have, again, this container. I'm going to put 2 blocks in it. And then if I put this class on it, AT grid 2, enter. Okay. then it automatically brings you these. And then if this gets smaller, then at some point it's going to break. There we go, right? So now it's less than 240 pixels, and then it becomes stacked, right? So let's say if I want to have a min width here for this grid 2 class of, let's say I go crazy, I want this to be 600. Like if an element in a grid becomes narrower than 600, then I want it to break, and that's what it does. So this is, I think it's really nice that this happens on the fly, and you can set this here. And I believe, let me know in the comments, but I believe ACSS's auto grid works slightly differently from that, but I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, there we go. Also, Maxime also has variables for this. If we go to grids and all the way down, we can see that there's a call min width that we can say, 270, whatever, and then 80 grid autofit and autofill. So you can have an autofit grid and an autofill grid just as a variable, and you can see here what it does. It just grabs this value that you put in here, and it has this as a minimum. It's really cool. All right, so this is also a good time to correct my fucked up timekeeping. We're actually at this point, according to my calculations, about 1.5 hours into this project, actual build time. We're going to start here, and the next thing we're going to do is just a little bit of prep work so we can go into these next sections. We're going to look into this font here. This font is called Shadows into Light. And again, we find it on Matthias Altman's font loader. We download it, we extract it here. We upload it to the server, we refresh bricks. Then we go here to this emphasis class, and in typography, we select that font. Make it a little bigger, 1.25 em. While we're here, we might as well rotate it a little. -5 is about right. And now we're going to use some of these buzzwords that appear on the front page of the old website. Definitely needs to be bigger, definitely needs to be centered, and rotate it the other way. Line height 1.2 is okay. And we might as well make it nice and orange on the bubble class, and nice and neutral on the bubble white class. Another thing I've decided is to dump the bubble S class altogether and delete. Why am I doing that? I want to do the sizing of individual bubbles on the ID level, because in the next section I have a few more bubbles in mind and they could have different sizes. So in this case we're going to do the max inline size of, I think it was 7 rem, 7.2. Now we're back. We are here for the philosophy. This is going to have 3 blocks in it. Bubbles, content, and bubbles. Put 1 bubble in here, 2 bubbles in here, and it's going to be a 3-column grid. 1.5 FR here, and 2 and 1.5. Use min-max, and here's everything we want. The services get a head container and a content container. And in the content container, we're going to have 3 cards. So this is going to be a grid 3. And then the call to action, 2 columns. And we're ready to style. So let's start with the services first. I want to have another gradient background here. Let's see if we can use a class for this in any shape. I don't think so though, because I kind of want to, I want to have a different color gradient, and I might want a different opacity for this. So there's no real use case here for a class. So we are just going to make our gradient here. I'm going to put a background image in first. Gradient apply to overlay, add 2 colors. Secondary dark one to secondary light one. Typography, white text. The head is going to have a heading and a blurb. Let's make it 70 characters. The card is going to have another heading. It's going to have a blurb, but this time rich text, so we can have paragraphs in it, and it's going to have a button. That's right, the button this time is going to be a primary button, and we're going to make it smaller. There we go. It looks fine out of the box. I don't think we need to do anything to it. Perhaps the text a little bit. So I'm not sure where to find the setting for the small text, for the small button. It's not here either. And while I'm at it, I don't know how to style the outlines either. I'm going to post about this on Facebook. Now this is going to be a heading 3, and I wanted to have a deco line. Let's use plain classes for that again. Okay, so when I made the deco line up here, it made sense at the time to make it a bright shade of the primary color, but down here that doesn't match, so I'm going to have to come up with some color magic here. So we're going to remove the color from the deco line class, and I'm going to use a gradient class after all. I'm going to call it gradient section, and in here we're going to put primary L4 on the after pseudo element of the deco line class inside this gradient section. But obviously I need to rename this gradient section to gradient section primary. And this one down here is going to be gradient section secondary, secondary L4 again. And now it actually does make sense to put all the styling from the ID on to the class. So on layout we have in block size, that doesn't belong to the class, that goes on the ID. Typography belongs to the class. Background, that shouldn't belong to the class. This belongs to the class. And then the CSS. I might as well leave that here now. So in this primary section, let's lock it. We're going to go to the ID level, ADVH height, and the background image, center, and full size. Now I'm going to open this gradient section primary class in the global class manager. Get the CSS. Going to go to the gradient section secondary, and I can't put the CSS in here, the generated CSS, but I think there's a way. Yeah, this is read only. And this is an interesting one. I think there's a way to just take all the CSS from one class and put it on another class. Doesn't seem like it, but, or if there is, I can't find it. So let's just import this from the ID style. So again, the background doesn't need to be on the class. We need the gradient here. And now we're also going to put a 0.85 opacity on the before pseudo class and go to the ID level. By the way, I wrote myself a little bit of CSS to increase the hitbox of this lock because it's so tiny that I always had trouble hitting it with my kludgy fingers. So now again, the background image goes here. Let's get some lorem ipsum for this. Sadly, the AT lorem ipsum generator doesn't work here. Maxime confirmed to me that it's not possible. Right click, class converter. So all of this is good. I want to copy the ID styles to the classes. I want to erase the ID styles, and I don't want to sync the labels, and I'm going to create the classes. And our service card is bamified. Now let's duplicate it 2 times. And there we go. Wait, the button's no longer small, and it's no longer primary. Yeah, this is actually a bug that I discovered earlier already. If I put BEM classes on something that contains a button, the button is reset. So let's delete these guys again and clone this one once more. Now this is going to be a bubble, and these two as well. I want these two to overlap again, so we're going to put this here to flex horizontal. It doesn't need a column gap. So here on the parent, I'm putting a bit of CSS to control the first bubble. Obviously here I could also go first child, same difference. Now let's make the second bubble, you know what, no, not white for this one because there's a white background. Let's make a new bubble background. Bubble primary, gonna put an overlay here. I believe it was 160. Fuck it, let's make a variable for the angle, shan't we? Which also leads us to another bug in AT. I can't scroll down here to reach the new category field. I need to zoom out the browser UI to get down here. Matty, Catty, Gory. Control 0 to zoom up again. I'm gonna call this gradient angle. Save to database. And we're gonna put the angle on the bubble class. Why doesn't it work? All right, so we have a problem here. The angle in degrees should be, we just put the number 160 here, and then in the code, this turns into var gradient angle DEG. So Bricks adds the DEG, the degrees thing, into the CSS automatically. And that's not possible. So this is what Claude tells me. I need to put the deg into the angle variable. Then since Bricks already puts that there, we're kind of shit out of luck here. I have 2 options. I can use this variable if I just write my own custom CSS for this overlay, which I'm too lazy to do, or I just remember my 160 degrees and be done with it. Alright folks, so this is the last time jump for the video, and as you can see, we are pretty far into this build right now. I've added a whole lot of styling. There's a fav icon now. There's a really nice logo here. The logo is also down here in the CTA section, which I have since built. We have gradients on H2s. We have a gradient, a very slight gradient on this H1. Here I added the bubbles and I styled them, and I added a bubble with a picture in it here that we're going to look at in some detail in a moment. And yeah, there's an outline button here that we're gonna do some styling to make it look better. And that pretty much means we're pretty far into this build. So you remember that we were talking about buttons and I wasn't really sure how to style some parts of them. So as you can see, I got some responses here from Maxime and Alan on Facebook. And Maxime pretty much says the button declarations are in the global advanced CSS file, which we're going to look into it in a moment. And Alan added that they're going to revisiting the button implementation this week. So if you go to the advanced CSS and look into the AT framework global CSS file, you'll see that there's a lot of styling here for the buttons. So we can see the variables. There's some explanations about how they work here. And I took some glances at this and we're going to make one change together. So to get a general rough idea, but I'm going to admit I haven't even wrapped my head around this fully yet myself. For instance, this whole -- underscore signifying locally scoped variables. I'm not really sure locally scoped to what, but if we look here, you can see there's the application of variables, 80 buttons. So we have default variables for the default buttons, styling, and then hover and focus states, variants, outlines for the primary, secondary background, secondary outline, and so on. And this button here, the hover state is really not that nice. It kind of looks muddy and the text becomes hard to read. So if we go back to the globals CSS file, we're going to see that further down here, the background hover color is this variable here, which we can then find in the variable manager. Also, we can see that further down towards the end. The sizes for the font sizes for small buttons, large XL are here. But that also means that if I want to make the text bolder, like you can see here, then it doesn't seem to be that there's a variable for that. So we'll actually do that in the button styling that Bricks provides. So we go into the variable manager and we see that for the light button down here, there is indeed the outline background hover color and it's T5. So let's make that just T1 and see what happens. And this looks nicer, I think. But now the text obviously is even harder to read. So we go to the theme styles and then to button, enable styling for the hover pseudo class. And then for the light outline typography, we pick the neutral color. And then another quick detour into button size small. Typography, we want to have the font weight. Let's make it 500 here. So it just gets a little bit bolder. Another thing, as I mentioned, that I did was the gradients for H1s and H2s. So it's really simple as that. I just put them into my own layout file here in WP code box, which the advanced theme or advanced CSS is compatible with. So I can just put that in here. Don't even think we need the color transparent. Let me just save and close. Yeah, and that gives us this wonderful little gradient effect here on the headings. The other thing I quickly wanted to talk about is another difference between ACSS and AT. Just one of those things where ACSS is just more comfortable or has more stuff out of the box. So for here, I have an image inside this bubble div, right? And I want this image to behave like a background, but I still want it to be an actual image. So in ACSS, there's the isBG class for that, where you can just make the image scale and fit itself into its container absolutely. But here I don't have any such class. I kind of need to write it myself. So I have here a BG image class that I wrote for the container, and then the CSS is just gets us the same result. Still, it's nice that ACSS provides this stuff out of the box, and it's just one of these examples where ACSS is just more complete, more involved, more intricate than the easier, more lightweight AT framework. And really, that's pretty much it. This is the site as it looks like now. And I think we can be really proud of that. You did a fantastic job watching me work. So what have we learned from this 4-hour build? ACSS is an extensive framework with so many features it's not even funny. Kevin and his crew keep coming up with innovative quality of life enhancements while ensuring great reliability and stability. The color system alone feels way ahead of advanced themers. There's an extensive documentation, cheat sheet, and the ACSS 101 class on YouTube. If you run it alongside advanced themers though, depending on your hardware and setup, you might experience lags and slowdowns in the Builder UI. Advanced Themer Framework is less flexible and extensive, but certainly covers all bases for your everyday page building needs. For an initial release, it is remarkably useful and feature-rich, especially in tandem with all the fantastic features Advanced Themer already has. For me, the faster and more responsive Builder UI and leaner plugin stack make this one very well worth checking out, even though it means doing some things on foot that ACSS provides a Ferrari for. Overall, each offers some stuff the other doesn't. The developers are crazy skilled, personable, and highly responsive when you report bugs. Maxime is actually AI, which is the only explanation why he never sleeps, while Kevin has a powerful team chained up in the basement that delivers faster than your mom. Bye!